4 things you need to ask for your next event. So let's say you're going to be doing your next event at a conference venue in a hotel or similar venue. There's some things that you need to know, because in my experience, communication is actually very terrible in hotels. Don't tell them that. Anyway, so number 1, you want to assess the size of the stage and screen you need. Now, you're always usually going to need a stage so people can see the audience can see the people on stage and see the podium and stuff like that. And very often you're going to need a screen, especially if somebody's going to do a corporate presentation, PowerPoint, demonstration, whatever. A screen, you'll need, sometimes you need to import the screen, sometimes the screens are in the room already with optimal viewing distance, etc. But let's say you're importing screens, some things you have to know, like the width of the room. Are they going to accommodate 4x8 stage decks when you put 4 of them in a row, which means 8, 16, 24 feet across, 4, 8, 12, 16 feet across, sorry. And then you have like maybe fast fold screens with trusses and dress up kits, which 6x8 screen is going to be 8 feet wide, plus with the legs, I believe is the terminology, on the sides for the dress up kit. You're going to need maybe 1.5 feet on either side, plus the valance that goes over the top to make it look pretty. You're going to need maybe close to 1 foot above that. So you don't want to hit any sprinklers on low ceilings. You want to be able to make sure the screen's going to fit in the space beside the stage or on either side of the stage, because sometimes you might want to use 2 screens and not just 1. So in my experience, like a 7.5 by 10 fast fold screen in a hotel conference room won't fit with a low ceiling. It just won't fit. So you need to go with maybe a couple of 6x8s instead of one 7.5 by 10. So you need to know the size of the stage and the size of the screen. How high is the stage going to be? At a certain height, you need steps. Legally and ethically, you need steps at a certain height. So you have to assess that. Next point. How noisy is the room next door going to be? So let's say they draw an air wall, and let's say it's a big banquet hall, but they chop it into 3 rooms for your event. So you have your own sound system, your own stage, etc. But they put an air wall up, meaning they pull the air wall out of the wall, and it doesn't have any electrical. It might have a door. It's not the best noise reduction. You might have a noisy event. One time we had an event with bagpipes going off a couple of doors away, and everybody could hear it. It disturbed the event because people couldn't hear the presentations properly. Well, maybe they could hear them, but they were getting distracted by the noise down the hall. So find out what event is being booked down the hall and say, put a clause in your contract saying if there's a noisy event booked after this time, you have to put us in a different room. You know, just make it fair. Anyway, so ask that. How noisy is the event next to you going to be, or down the hall, or on the same floor? Very important. Number 3, if you need access to a loading dock, what are the rules of the loading dock in that particular venue? Now, I know by working in downtown Toronto, it can be a nightmare. It's ridiculous sometimes. It's not fun at all. It brings AV costs up because we have to spend more hours delivering equipment. Some places have such strict rules, and they share elevators that you can't get the gear up on the floor that you need it to on time. One King West, it has like a 2-vehicle loading bay, and sometimes, very often, I've gone up to the Austin Gallery on the 12th floor to set up an event, stage decks and everything, and screens and all that kind of stuff, and it's very difficult to get up to the 12th floor. You don't just bring it up, you have to go through the freight elevator. But now they actually have a freight elevator operator which you have to go through. So you can't even operate the elevator on your own anymore. So it's a real hassle. So find out about that stuff. Loading dock rules. It can be very annoying. It can be very costly because it's going to add extra hours to set up and strike. And it can be very congested if you're going to have a very difficult event with a lot of things going on at once and things moving back and forth. You need storage for your gear in between when it's going to be moved. Anyway, so ask about that. Loading dock rules. Okay, very important. And number 4, 24-hour lockdown. Let's say you have a multiple day event where you're doing things over 2 to 3, maybe 4 days, and then you have certain rooms where you need certain gear like stage and screen and pipe and drape and all this kind of fancy stuff set up, and the AV gear. Never mind the staging, but the AV gear. If you don't have a 24-hour lockdown, or you haven't negotiated a 24-hour lockdown, basically what's going to happen is they can sell the room at night. Now, if you do this in advance and you say, I'm negotiating a 24-hour lockdown, once you negotiate, put it in the contract, they can't do anything. You leave your stuff there for 2-3 days, and they can't touch it. But if you don't do that at night, what they can do is they can say, well, we've sold the room at night, and you're going to have to tear down again or strike, and then set up the next morning. That's going to add a lot of money to your bill with the AV company. So, really look at that. Look at the 24-hour lockdown. And one more bonus thing here, which I didn't write on my list, and maybe I will now. Okay, I'll write it later. If you use a combination of on-site audiovisual plus outside audiovisual, you can negotiate certain things. Like if there's an event going on right after your event and they need the same gear, you could say, listen, I'd like to rent staging and screening off you, and since you're already going to set it up, why don't you set it up once and I'll pay half price or something like that. So you get to use it, then they get to use it. Because what hotels don't tell you sometimes is, and other like banquet venues and stuff like that, is they'll book an event 1 hour after yours stops. So that gives you an hour, and your team 1 hour to strike everything. But if the next event starts 1 hour after yours, they have to set up too. I was caught in a few situations where a meeting planner didn't negotiate or ask this stuff, and we had an hour to strike. It was an hour and a half strike, okay, but we had an hour. Plus the people setting up had an hour, and they had at least a 2-hour setup. It just doesn't work. So obvious it doesn't work. But if this stuff is hammered out to begin with, and before the event, usually you can save a lot of headaches and save a significant amount of money just by planning properly. Anyways, I urge everyone to plan properly, and well, that's what I'm here for, because I've had a lot of field experience. And I'm just, this is where it's coming out, because I've just seen so many disappointments, and I've seen a lot of great events and a lot of poor events and a lot of everything in between, and a lot of headaches, like unnecessary headaches that just didn't have to happen for the reasons I'm telling you. Anyway, there's a lot more to cover, and this is the type of stuff that I cover in my consultations, and I also cover with the downloads and stuff like that. So if you want to, contact me, and we can talk over the phone, we can do Skype, email, whatever, we can. Let's talk about your next event and make it some sort of deal to make sure you don't have the headaches and extra expenses that you don't need, because sometimes I think the expenses are not justified if they're worked out beforehand. Anyways, that's the whole concept of Before You Show It. It's a proactive audiovisual solutions, and I'm Buck Moore, on my way to somewhere out wester than I am already. Okay, off button.